Hello, welcome everyone. We're so glad
Hello.
to see you. Um, we're going to give it maybe 1 or 2 minutes to let other people jump on board if that's okay. But definitely take a minute, tell us where you're from, and we're super excited to share some of this
You
information with
can drop it in the chat. Yeah, as they say.
you.
South Bend, Indiana. Oh, Midwest, West Coast, California. I have dropped a link in the chat to a lean coffee board that you can access. That's what's going to be driving probably 50 minutes of today's discussion is going to be all about you and your questions.
Absolutely.
So it looks like this, just so
Been
you
good?
know. Looks like we've already got some people coming in. That's awesome. Um, and
Absolutely.
you'll
Yeah.
see some topics have already been submitted, but you can just add your question right up where it says add topics. Just say, this is my question and hit add. And in a little bit, we'll go through a voting exercise. And again, you are going to be driving this meeting for the most part. We got a little bit to cover at the outset, but that's about it.
Awesome. All right, so I want to welcome everybody here. We are so glad that you're here. You've probably been told to use AI, but few people actually explain how to make it real. And that's the reason why we wanted to bring to you this information on AI native foundations and the AI native change agent. We literally are going to take 5 minutes of your time and we're giving you the rest of the time. So we're looking forward to your questions. But for those of you that are not familiar with AI native or said, hey, I'm just interested in this, which is probably very few of you, we still want to give you a small introduction. So when we say AI native, we're talking about a transformation that's every bit as significant as the shift from project to product or from waterfall to agile. We talk about this and we say, what does being AI native mean? And it means that every part of your life touches or uses AI. It's a little scary, isn't it? But to do this, then SAI has put together two different courses, and that's AI Native Foundations. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of Foundations and Change Agent. So if you think about it, AI Native Foundations is about thinking and working differently, right, in the age of AI. So it's where all the light bulbs go off. And Doug and I got to experience this ourselves. So when we went through it, it was pretty amazing to watch those light bulbs go off. And as we're watching these other classes and courses, that's exactly what's going on. So this is just 2 immersive days that you go through. And I do say immersive, they're face to face. Everybody keeps asking for remote, but they're face to face. And why are they? They are there because nobody can explain to you what happens during this course, right? But what you will leave with within the course is a shared AI vocabulary that bridges business and technology. But even if you're just having a casual conversation, you'll also leave with a responsible adoption playbook so you can move fast without breaking trust and kind of a three-phase action plan that you can take forward. So I've watched people walk into this course not understanding AI at all, leaving with their own agent that is actually giving them value that day. It's fun. You'll experiment, you'll test, you'll laugh. I mean, it's a great course. So you can read the slides. I haven't went through everything that it is. Again, 2 days, lots of fun, lots of learning, and you leave with things that you can use not just in your business life, but also in your personal life. So let's talk AI native change agent, right? So it's kind of about guiding your organization to true AI success. And what is that? We keep hearing AI is not successful. Everything keeps failing. And why is that? And so change agent really focuses on about making it happen, making it successful. So foundations is more about discovering, and change agent is about making it happen, right? So if most AI initiatives die in what we lovingly call the POC graveyard, and you'll learn a lot more about, then how do we scale, prototype, and provide people with things that they can actually use? And so that is what this is. So whenever you walk through change agents and you attend that, that's 3 days, immersive again, absolutely empowering. You walk away with three things: a repeatable framework for scaling AI across teams. That is what we do really well, is we're not teaching you just technology. We're teaching you technology and making sure you understand how to integrate it into your framework and scale it across teams. So you also leave with a 30, 60, 90-day roadmap that turns the opportunity into an actual production impact. How do you actually deliver business value? And then tools to spot hype traps, right? They're all out there. We all get caught by them. And stalled pilots, right? Before they burn resources. That's the worst thing that can happen. You'll have a stalled pilot, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to jump off the AI bandwagon. So, this course helps build confidence, the kind of confidence that says, yes, AI can change everything, and I know exactly where to start. So that's my couple of minutes, and I think the rest is in your hands. We're going to do a lean coffee, and you all get to pick the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. That great introduction. As you see on my screen here is a lean coffee board. I keep dropping the link into chat, um, and I will do it one more time. This is where we're going to capture your questions. So we're going to spend about, I don't know, 5 minutes here. We want to exercise your questions. So if you've already put a question in chat, please go ahead and put it on this board. And what we're going to do is, again, kind of some silent writing time here to let you post your questions on this board. And then we're going to vote. And you are going to vote using the little vote. You'll see the little vote button on each of these cards. Everybody has 3 votes. And then we'll close the voting. And based on the number of votes, we're going to go question by question through these. We're going to give about 3 minutes for each question. If we haven't sufficiently answered it, at the end of that 3 minutes, you're going to get an opportunity to say, we want to continue this discussion. Let's move on, right? And we'll go through them at whatever pace is necessary. Since it's turned off for you to actually speak, if we're answering a question and we get to a point and people want additional information, that's when we'll use the chat here in Zoom so that you can actually post in the chat, what didn't we answer? What didn't we address? We kind of covered it, didn't cover it. If we can provide any additional clarity, we'll do that as well via the chat. So I'm going to turn you all loose. I see some attendees on the board, so please go ahead. All you have to do to ask a question is just in this highlighted section at the top. Right, let me annotate here. Maybe not. Yeah, just add your topic here. Just type it in and hit enter. And if you don't have a topic to add, but you see something interesting that's on here, you can go ahead and vote. Everybody has 3 votes. And I'm going to give it, I have 9 minutes after. I'm going to go probably another 3 minutes or so. And then we're going to, give you 48 minutes of question and answer. I'm still sharing, correct?
Yes, Doug, we can.
I turned off annotation, so I was like, did I?
There's lots of great questions out here.
Mm.
Yeah, while they're filling that out, I did kind of skip over probably the best page of the presentation, Doug, which was that we do already have some courses that are set up that are public. We offer those public and private. So we have some private ones underway as well, but we have some public ones available out there in Atlanta, Chicago, and Raleigh coming up. So I encourage you to jump in. I mean, Doug is an amazing facilitator. It's a lot of fun. I wish I could explain this. And I have taken a lot of these courses. And so a lot of these courses were really just about the technology. And what I felt like whenever I was in there, that I was learning more about the humanistic side of it as well. So both kind of in tandem. But there was never a time during these courses that we weren't laughing and sharing and learning and kind of challenging ourselves. So I wish I could, I guess, articulate that to you right now, but you'll see it once you're there in that course. If you don't see a course near you, then I would encourage you to reach out to Beth or Dalen or anybody from Icon and tell them where you want that course. We have enough people there. We will bring that course to you.
All right, I'm gonna go
That's
just another minute or two. I see some new topics coming in. I don't want to let anyone get cut off. So if you've got a topic,
yeah.
if you joined a little late, the Lean Coffee Table link is in the chat. We go one more minute. So if you have a topic, quick, get it in there. Vote if you want to exercise your vote. This is being recorded, so um, is that right, Beth? It is being recorded, so our discussion will be captured. Someone asked that in the chat.
Yes, we will provide the link for the replay.
I'll add this question. Somebody asked for this question. Or I'll see if I can, if it'll allow me to, but yes. And if anybody has any questions about more details, I assumed that we could send out the flyers for foundations and change agent. I just wanted to tell you, what the difference of the two were, how long it was. So please feel free to throw those questions in as well. We will be answering any questions that you submit.
All right, I'm going to give you 20 more seconds to vote if you haven't already, and then we're going to start the discussion. Ten seconds.
Kind of disappointing when you realize that you've used all your votes and you see another group question.
Yeah, you can unvote as well if. All right, let's go ahead. We'll start the discussion. And right at the top of the list is, we're going to give you this 3 minutes. And how does this compare to other AI training programs we could invest in? Uh, I can jump in here. Karen, please feel free to answer as well. This is a completely immersive experience. That's, Karen shared that. This isn't just another prompt engineering class. This is truly becoming, AI native. And again, the reason why it's in person is because you're working alongside people. You're actually doing problem solving. You're actually going to take away from the foundations class an actual agent that is part of your workflow to help you automate something using AI. It's not just prompt engineering. It goes way beyond that. It goes into, how we can look at how we can stay fresh with AI, right? How do we keep looking at new ways to use AI? And you're going to learn a lot from your peers. I mean, there are prerequisites to the class, including come to the class with a workflow, right? And you're actually going to be using your real workflow. I've taken the MIT class, I've taken a Stanford class, I've taken all these, great at prompt engineering, nothing wrong with those, right? But it didn't give me the immersive nature of this. I didn't walk away with something I could actually use other than how to write a really nice prompt. But this goes way beyond that. Anything you want to add, Karen?
And just something short to wrap up because I think you did a great job. I think that if you go out to some of the other very technical courses and everything, they're going to tell you what AI can do for your business. But to me, what we show you is we show you how to embed it in the way you think, in the way you decide, and the way you deliver every day, which is very different. It focuses on the humanistic side of it as well, while teaching you the technology, so you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and it's actually um, a really interesting kind of classroom technique too. I mean, it's like way more hands-on, right? It's some instruction. So the way the course is designed, it's like you know, like 20-60-20 kind of thing, right? It's like 20% instruction, 60% hands-on, doing stuff, building things, engaging with the instructors to help, engaging with your peers to help, and then like 20% every hour is then recap and let's take what we learned and let's apply that kind of some of that back of the classroom kind of training to where you're actually going to be learning from each other, which you won't get in an online class. You just won't get it.
And the learning from each other is absolutely probably one of the best things, right? Because people start to bring their ideas, they share with you what they're doing. We find new tools all the time. I mean, it's just a lot of energy and it's very collaborative.
So that's about the time. And now it's your opportunity. Do you want to know more about this topic? Um, says, was doing something in your workflow, what type of permissions access to corporate tech access is required? Let me extend this topic for just so kind of split. So let me extend this for just 2 minutes because there's a question in the chat. What is doing something in your workflow? What type of permissions access? You really don't need any permissions access to corporate resources. You just need to understand the workflow because that's what you're going to do with building an agent is you're going to say, well, here's my workflow steps. Which steps of this workflow could I automate? It has nothing to do with like access to corporate systems per se, but you're just going to want to understand like how do we do defect management? How do we do, how do I do backlog refinement? How do we do that? Is there a way that I could use AI to do some of that stuff? I mean, I brought in a whole something from the product organization when I did this was something that my product managers were actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I'm like, as a coach, how could I use this, build an agent to help me help them with a portion of their, how they actually prepare roadmaps, because that was all a part of it. So I took that process and I built the agents, and now I've applied those agents into that. So it's like you don't have to have access to corporate networks. You do have to have access to an LLM of some sort, whether that's Copilot internally or if you have a private access to ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, whatever it is, you will need that.
We are seeing that in our private courses as
Yeah.
well, right? So what is interesting, he said, I typically think that agents are reading or writing to corporate systems. You would think that, but I actually have a whole series of agents that help me manage my household, and things like that, just since learning this and putting it together. So I would tell you from a personal perspective, great impact to be able to use agents and just to learn AI and see how it can help you in your day to day. And then also from a technology perspective, if you're taking this inside your company and your whole company is learning, then there are some technology kind of requirements, but we can work with your technologist and have that set up for you. So it depends on where you take it, private or public.
Yeah, but definitely in this class, you don't have to have access to anything. You're going to be able to do an agent that just does some things with you know what's available in the LLM and just to help guide or shortcut a few things if possible. So, um, do we want to keep talking about this? Finish the topic. Your votes matter. Trending towards end. All right, let's move this one to discussed. Ooh, good one. As an Agile coach and a safe program consultant, how can I use AI to progress with my IT teams? Karen, you want to start? Or
You can throw.
sure. So all the time. So I'm an SPCT. I use AI every single day. I consider myself to be AI native. I come to work and go, how can AI help me today? Right. So when I'm actually coaching, whatever I'm doing, PI planning, for example, I use AI to do all kinds of stuff for PI planning. If there's an issue that comes up, hey, what might AI say about this particular issue? Can I form a prompt that says, hey, here's what we're dealing with? Something came up in inspect and adapt, a problem. Hey, can you throw out some ideas? Hey, AI, can you throw out some ideas as to how we might address this problem? What could be some tickler questions I could ask to actually generate some root cause analysis? What are some why questions I could ask, some powerful questions I could ask to really drill down into what's the root cause? It's like this question is limitless,
That's
right? It is so huge. So as a agile coach, I'm evaluating. Oh, I use just so we've created just created with one of my clients. We created a feature quality guide. How do we know that we have a good feature quality against Jira, right? So they're using Jira Align, and they're putting all their features in there. So we created this guide. We actually asked Copilot, because that's what they had. Hey, can you take this guide that we wrote on quality features, and here's the 8 features I wrote for this PI. Can you give me a scorecard of how well these features are written against the guide that we built collectively as a product management team to say this is what a quality feature is? And can you give me a report card grade, A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, F, right, on this? And it actually did it. Copilot actually took what they created as a quality standard, ran it against their Jira Align, sync those two together, and it scored all of their features in terms of the quality. And it actually gave them suggestions as to how they can actually improve those features against their own standards of quality. It's just limitless what you can do.
And do you remember the days of when we used to say, as long as something is in that field, then our quality is good? So those of you who have implemented these systems and you looked at it and said, hey, as long as that description field was populated, then we're going to consider that quality, right? But if it's missing, then it's low quality. And so now having the ability to read that, understand it, and actually interpret what true quality means is pretty powerful. If I can just add in, sorry, I know, Doug, that you're super
Go for it.
passionate about it as well, but I think that one of the things that I see is with AI, and if you use it from a coaching perspective, that you get to spend less time kind of chasing down data and more time actually doing the coaching that really means so much, right? You spend less time reporting and more time improving across the board. And so being able to incorporate it into what you use to help you know where to focus, I think is really important. I think that to Rally, Jira, all of them are coming up with different, I guess using AI within their process flows and being able to help some of that. I would integrate that as soon as possible. Dependency mapping. We're seeing large corporations that are able to look across their entire organization with AI and being able to spot those dependencies. You can do scenario simulations in PI planning. So we just did this recently. We literally ran 3 different scenarios and said which one is the best and what trade-off decisions do we have to make. And so that's pretty powerful. I like Doug said, it was really broad. So when he asked that and he goes, do you want to tackle that? I was like, gosh, where do I go? Because I could talk about it probably forever, depending on what you wanted to speak about. But I think that it helps. What I've also seen, probably one of the biggest things that I've seen is it's really helped us bridge technology in the business. And I know some of you are saying, Karen, isn't that in the past? And I thought it was, but when AI kind of popped up, I noticed that the technologists started talking very technical again, and the business people thought they were left out. And what we're seeing is the business people are right there beside them, right? And the AI allows us to kind of speak both languages fluently and brings that together. So lean portfolio management, we've we've integrated it into that, right? To where you can actually look at what value are you truly delivering and making decisions on the spot instead of saying, hey, we have to wait for this data to inform us. I mean, I could go on and on
Yeah.
about different ways to use it from a coaching perspective.
And happy to share more examples if you want to extend the topic, but now's the time. I've got examples from minor team level things all the way up to value stream management, right? I've used it across the board in, the business agility value stream. I've used it in nearly every aspect. So uh, people want to extend. So are there any specific examples? Um, again, I've used it in value stream management, right? Helping me identify a value stream, right? People are struggling with identifying the steps in their operational and their development value streams. So let's look, what does other industries do? Like, what are some other comparative industries to you? I mean, I helped a music publishing company that was struggling with how do we do this? How do we manage all this? We're not really sure what our value stream is. Well, help them identify, hey, they actually have two major operational value streams, and it just blew their mind, right? And it really came from using AI to say, how can we work with songwriters, to actually do, all their credits and things? And so it's like, how do you actually build that? We used AI a lot for value stream management. Karen said LPM, lots of things with, roadmaps and OKRs. Use it all the time for OKRs, right? AI is great at helping you write really good OKRs, right? That are really meaningful and impactful and connect to the teams, like help them really engage with what is my purpose, right, for all this.
One of
So
the
it,
really exciting things that one of my clients just did was they used it to do kind of persona modeling, right? So
oh
they
yeah.
simulate their stakeholders and they build that persona, and that persona becomes one across the board. So when we looked at it, we had like 80 different personas because everybody said, hey, here's my five, here's my 10. And what we found out is there were really a lot fewer personas. People had kind of duplicated them or thought about them differently. And so they came together, and then it allows them to grow them, right? And to keep building them. And so then they had a centralized repository. So I'd say that we went from 80, and I think right now we're at 17 distinct. So think about 80 across this whole organization that people just were kind of looking at their side of the persona. So now that persona exists, right? And it gets added to no matter which department is working with it. As it starts to create it and put more information into that persona, everybody gets the benefit of that. Well, think about the end user and the benefit they get from it too. So I would tell you that's a really neat. I was just trying to think of what are some of the best, examples. That persona modeling is something that AI enables and is pretty transformative.
One thing I suggest too is putting on my consultant hat and making personal investments is I've invested in the professional versions of a couple of large language models, right? Professional versions of ChatGPT, professional versions of Claude, Perplexity. And one neat thing about that is you can actually train it to be like you. So I've fed in a lot of like the things that I have published, like things like my writing style. And here's my technique, here's my approach, things, my personality profile, right? What is my personality profile? I fed that in. What are the thinking hats that I typically go to? What are the ones that I'm strongest and weakest in? And I can actually do that and train my model so that when I ask it prompts, it's going to put an output that would sound like me, right? So like I'm not going to use I tend to be focused on humor, right? I use a lot of humor in my stuff. So I'm not going to get real serious and super highly cerebral on you. I know some coaches that are like that are incredibly like, you know, they know the textbook in and out, right? But I tend to want to use, more humanistic language. And so just things like that. And it will guide me. So like if I get a response and I want to use that response, I will always read it before I just say it out loud. But, it does start to sound more and more like me based on the input. So if you haven't invested in a professional version of whether that's ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or Grok or whatever, right? Invest in it. It's not, $100 a year for what it can do for me and how it can emulate some things and shortcut my life. And hey, I've said this already. How did I say this before? It knows so that I'm consistent, right?
So,
So,
Doug, now we can all have a version of Doug to
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah,
So,
yeah, good, yeah.
all right, I
All
think
right,
we're ready to move on to another question.
yeah, all right. How to incorporate, I guess, AI into an enterprise agile transformation. I think we've shared a lot of this already, like value stream mapping. That's some of the things I do up front. Value stream mapping. What is the tipping point kind of things? What are those tipping point problems? Um, even examining, are they ready for agile? Like you can take some things like pre-assessments. Like I've entered assessment data. Like we come in and we assess the current environment, and here's the situation they're having. Are they more aligned to projects or products, right? How, what's the organization like? You can actually look at some things like that and say, what might be some approaches, some baby steps that we could take to actually bring them on, right? Where are some problem areas?
Yeah, too. Doug, what do you think about this? I would say that to create maybe a RAG, an internal RAG, right away, right off the bat. And as you start your enterprise agile transformation, or if you say incorporate it, AI is going to be part of it, right? So it's funny, I hear people talk about them two different ways. And I feel like that AI is the technology. And when we've been in trying to teach corporations agile and transform them, then we can't really talk about them one without the other. If we are, then we're endangering ourselves, right? Because it's here and it's here to stay. So I would create maybe an internal RAG right away, put some decisions in there. It's going to help you as you move throughout because when you say enterprise, I think big company, right? And so a lot of different decisions could be made along the way. Just a thought. What are your thoughts?
In RAG, that's retrieval augmented generation. So that's basically adding to the LLM your own internal processes, procedures, documents, artifacts, right? Building up this artifactory of, not just what's out there in the public domain, but things that are private, and you can keep it behind a firewall to where it's all protected and safe. You're basically helping that large language model answer questions also using your company's internal data. Right? That's really what it is. It's augmenting those responses so that it isn't just pulling from the ether. It's actually using, your company's own, background data, HR data, procedure data, policy data, standard operating procedures. All those things you can use to build out what it is that's part of your organization. So again, there's just this we could probably talk about this and give examples for the entire time of how you could use it in agile transformation, but it's only limited by your imagination, really. Is what I would say. How you can use it in agile transformation, it's only limited by your imagination, or if the company is
Process.
saying we're not going to use AI, well, then I'm not.
Process and product. I would tell you always think that way. Process and product, both.
All right. Trending towards end, I just want to make sure that we're letting the audience drive this. That's the way Lean Coffee works. Trending toward end. All right. Oh, more of the same. What are some fast and effective ways RTEs, product owners, scrum masters, and other stakeholders use AI to write better epics, features, programming, etc.? One thing I will say, and this is a shameless plug. So if you're already using Safe, like taking it, so I should say, so all this AI native, even though it's with Scaled Agile, it's a completely separate business unit. That's one thing we should have said at the front is in these classes, you will not hear mention of SAFe other than this is run by Scaled Agile Framework. This is a completely separate business. They've hired a completely different group. There's this responsible AI group. There's this whole new team that didn't come from SAI, right? There's only like one person that came from SAI to lead this thing, but everybody is new, completely new line of business. So it is a completely separate thing. It's just like Scaled Agile has kind of reached a state of maturity. They know that in order to grow, their blue ocean strategy is we have to look at some other areas of interest, not just Agile. So let's pursue AI. So it's a whole new foundation here. So with that, though, back on the safe side, there has been every one of the training classes is being updated now to incorporate AI into the training, including Scrum Masters, product owners. And if you have an active an active credential and you go out to the safe community, there are now videos, there's whole video and training series on how you can, as a Scrum Master, it's a Scrum Master training series, you using AI as a Scrum Master, as a PO, using a PO, as an RTE, using AI as an RTE. They are available, they've been updated, and they keep adding to them. And they're adding at a much faster rate than Scaled Agile ever has. So they are adding additional skills that they're called additional skills. So there's a whole skills training around AI for nearly every role, and they keep adding and adding and adding to them. So I will say that that's one fast and effective way.
So let's give them a couple of little great things that they could use them with, if that's okay. What was it? I would tell you Scrum Masters. I've seen them recently using sentiment analysis, right? So they're recording their online meetings and they're using sentiment analysis to kind of inform them. I mean, it's pretty powerful. So I would tell you that that's an effective way to use it. If it's allowed within your organization. That's going to be a question mark everywhere, right? RTEs, again, they're able to see things, what they spent a lot of times looking at and kind of trending before. They don't have to do that, right? They can have a dashboard. It tells them exactly where they need to go and where their help is needed. When TPOs, I'm going to assume that might mean technical product owners.
Maybe, yeah.
And so for me, I mean, if you think about what you did with it from a TPO perspective before, you had to be the most knowledgeable about everything about your systems. And now you have the systems documentation. AI can help you with that. It's going to spot, you're going to talk to it. It's going to become an advisor for you. So I always say, look at it from a process perspective, but also from a product perspective. How can I incorporate AI in my products that we're developing? But as well as how can I make my process that I do every day better? And it's amazing. I mean, I literally have an agent who tells me what my menu is going to be for the next week. I have a family that's very picky and has a lot of allergies. It keeps track of my groceries and what I need, and I like do nothing anymore on that side. And it always proposes the menu and says, this is what you need. Do you want me to go ahead and order it? And if I'm going to be home, I might say yes. If I'm not, then I might say, hey, I only need 3 days of that. And it's getting to know us. We give it feedback and it gets to know us. And so I'm telling you, use it however, anytime that you find yourself spending time on something saying, I wish I was spending time on something else, then ask AI how it can help you do that. But the Scrum Master sentiment analysis was a really great example of a recent use of it. And it was able to pick up on things that Scrum Master could not do themselves.
Yeah, and I know Scrum Masters that use AI to help them analyze data, right? Hey, here's the last 6 iterations, kind of like sentiment analysis, but here's the last 6 iterations worth of data. Can you see some trends? Are you seeing, can you help me spot something that I might not be seeing, right? And, what are some hidden things? Do you see trends? Do you see anomalies in this data? Like I said, POs and PMs actually using scorecards, AI to generate scorecards as to how effective they're writing stories and features, right? Score it for me, right? Help me write these. Hey, here's an idea. How could I break this down into some acceptance criteria? Here's my criteria for, I have acceptance criteria for pass, fail, and exceptions, right? Can you help me with some of those? Here's some personas. Can you help me using these actual personas write these stories relative to personas? How might someone that is budget conscious look at this different than someone that is like a free spender, right? If I'm in, the risk aversion of different personas could lead to different acceptance criteria, different stories. So it's like all kinds of things you could use for that. Again, it's only
Morgan?
limited by your imagination and what your company says you can and can't do.
Well,
So,
hopefully, as you all vote on this, hopefully you're not scared because I think sometimes when I hear people talk, I think, gosh, does that mean that the Scrum Master is going to go away? Absolutely not. It
no.
makes you more effective. It makes you better than what you've ever been. And so I just like to say that because I get that question all the time. Karen, you're telling me everything it can do for us. And what is that doing? It does not make you obsolete. It makes you unshakably effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more, it makes it even stronger, right? It frees me up to do some of the more human side, the stuff about like actually going and building relationships with my customers, right? I'm finding I'm building much stronger relationships, the human connection. I'm spending more time on that than just, hey, here's another piece of, safe advice or another, you know, thing you can go look at, another workshop, right? No, let's focus on how do we, deal with conflict. AI is not going to do really well with dealing with conflict, right? It's you know,
So we've got a lot of no preferences. To me, I take that as let's move on. And
how quickly might we see measurable business impact after training? Uh, I would say right away. Right? Again, because you're actually leaving this class with something, because you're bringing into this class some actual background information that you're bringing to it. If you do the prerequisites correctly, I will caveat at that, right? If you follow the prerequisites and you come in with some actual real world things, you're going to leave with some ways to actually address that. Um, the, One of the greatest stories came out of the AI native class that was held at the Safe Summit is a whole table of people helped this gal with one aspect of her workflow. And it took them, I mean, they hadn't figured out. They stayed late after day one and they helped her with it. And she was literally in tears because she's like, this just saved me over 100 hours a year that I now can do something else with. And she was just literally like a visceral emotional reaction because she goes, what you've done for me is something that, oh my goodness, how could I have ever done this? I was wasting so much time and this could have done this for me. And she's like, the last 2 years, like, I wish I had those 200 hours back, right? So you will leave with something that you can actually use.
absolutely. And that's, yeah, it's so similar story. A person who was working on presentations for 9 hours a week just to be able to give it every Friday, literally. She said, okay, this has helped me kind of format my thoughts. I can just talk to it and tell it what I want it to say, and then it gives me an outline, and then we just continue to refine. She said it's like having a partner right there next to you. But also, it's bringing a 9 hour task down to one. I mean, that's just one. And she was like, this is amazing. That's the worst part of my job is having to develop everything into a presentation. And, a tool was shared with them during the course and they were able to embrace it, use it, and help it, and put it into their overall process, I guess, map. That's why I always say processes and product, but super interesting what the impact that you're seeing.
Yeah. And then if you are a change agent and you are going to be actively participating, running, engaging, leading AI initiatives, right? The change agent class takes it even a step further because you're going to leave that class with either how to get a staled initiative moving forward, something out of the POC graveyard that we call it, right? All these AI proof of concepts that haven't gone anywhere. You're actually leaving with, for use my project management terms, an actual project plan, right? You're going to leave with a plan for how you can actually turn this idea into something constructive, including like things like stakeholder maps and who do you need to engage, a complete step-by-step guide for how you can take one of your real projects or an idea and how I turn that into something that is actually going to generate ROI for my company. That's the whole premise of the change agent is how do I take an idea or a proof of concept and I get real return on it?
Yeah, which is pretty powerful. Actually, we touch on it in foundations and then we dive into it in change agent, but how to articulate the opportunity too. Because how many times have you had a great idea and you're like, gosh, I know that AI could impact this, and you're going and you're explaining it, and people are looking at you like, oh, we're not going to allocate, right, to that because you cannot articulate it in the manner that you probably should be able to, right? So, because we get caught into all of the different processes. And so we're explaining that. So, that's somebody said to me, hey, I was able to walk out of here, use this business case that you all gave us and showed us how to use and articulate how much time that I think that it could save us, where I think that those opportunities are. So I tell people all the time, if you're going to have a private course, then you want to listen because your people are telling you where those opportunities are, right? So that's another thing. I believe that you'll walk out and it'll be beneficial right off because it'll allow you to articulate that. It looks like we're ending.
We're trending towards finish. Just want to give, I like to give just a few seconds.
Look, me, I'm like, okay, we're done.
All right, we are done. How can we capture the, how can we capture the value of enabling our agile teams with AI? And that's something Change Agent will actually help you with, is how you actually capture that. We do a little bit in foundations, but it's really in the Change Agent class. That's a lot of what it is. It's that whole return on AI. I mean, like day two is all about like, how do I actually get return on my AI investments, right? So how do we see the value, whether that's in time savings, you know, all the classic things that you would look for how you capture ROI, right? You know, pirate metrics or whatever. Like, what am I doing to see better automation? Am I freeing up time to do other things? Am I reducing time in meetings? Am I actually generating better outcomes? All of these things are subject for capturing the value. There's no like one recipe, no one formula. It's going to be based on what that POC is, what it's doing, you know, what it's producing for you, whether it's, you know, an agent inside of a workflow that is actually going to do something, or if it's chatbots that are going to be saving time on with customer service reps, right? Because it's going to be, you know, saving the time to the customer service reps actually have a bunch of data to go and actually address a problem before it actually gets to a human, right? So it's providing additional information for them, or maybe a chatbot is able to, you know, actually do some of the basic level one kind of things that free up my humans to actually work on more complex problems. So not replace them, but free them up to really use this, you know, the scientific method to really do more, you know, using their head and using their brain to do things that, you know, AI can be very predictive, but it's not deterministic, is what they keep saying, right? It's predictive because it's looking at it can only say, hey, here's from what the past is, here's a projection for what the answer might be, but it isn't deterministic. We still need humans in the loop to make them deterministic, but um, so many ways to get value.
Yeah. I met with somebody last week to talk to them about how they're using AI. And I just said, I really want to understand, you know, the challenges and everything. So number one, they do have a team member who is AI, but they said we had to stop thinking that AI could write all of the code and that it would be perfect, which I've always said that it's 80-20. He goes, I'm going to tell you it's 70-30, right? And so what they had to do is put these breaks within code, I guess code that write the code as chunks, and then they would put these breaks to where it does have that human kind of review portion in there. And so he was explaining their entire process and the pain that they had went through at first. So unfortunately, sometimes people hear, hey, it can replace you. It absolutely will not replace you, but it will augment you. It will make you better. And so how do you embrace it, right? So don't push it away, I always say, but to learn from other companies. And so hopefully what we can do as Icon too is start to share some of those stories with you all. Or so whether that be, you know, a podcast or just even just a blog area that you all can see, because it was pretty enlightening what they had learned when, and I can't share too many details without their permission, but what they had learned and then how they had looked at their process and broke it up and said, when do the humans have to be involved? And there was never a time that the human was not involved on a frequent basis. So I would tell you, definitely, how do you capture the value? You tell them, hey, 70% of this is done. You'll start, if you start to measure some of the errors, the bugs, the defects, whatever, then you should start to see those go down. It's pretty powerful, but I know that that wasn't just exactly that question, but hopefully it helped.
It's the quality of conversations too go way up, right? Like, so if I'm using AI to help me with some backlog refinement, and maybe it's the first crack at breaking a feature down into stories is AI, but then my teams can actually take that and say, well, no, given our knowledge of the technology and the domain, we can refine that. It's a whole lot easier to refine things than to generate them from the scratch. I mean, generate them from scratch, right? Is going to take more time. But if I have something that I can then go redline through and change and alter, it changes the conversation, right? And it gets them focused more on really the value that they add as people to those things, and really thinking about these are things AI doesn't know. And here's the we just add that part of it. So where are we trending? It's almost split the difference here. But seeing if there's anything in chat that would indicate we missed the mark on that question. Well, let's go ahead and, for the sake of time, should our executives
We do.
take foundations, or is this just for practitioners? This is probably a short question. Yes, executives should take it. This is for everybody in the organization. It's not limited to practitioners. It's not for tacticians, technical people. We had executives, we had people from every level of the organization in these classes. And it's creating that shared language. It's going to alleviate executives' fear, right? That's a big part of it, is how they can actually use it, use the edge that they call it, right? To look at how we can use this exponentially and how we can do outgrowth and all these different things that we want to do out of these. So, like, how can we be generative? How can we use this to propel us into the future? How can this be a partner for us, responsibly? So definitely responsible AI is part of this. So I would definitely encourage executives, everybody from the business side. I mean, every part of your organization would benefit from this. An HR person would benefit from this. A legal person would benefit. Compliance would benefit from it. A salesperson, a marketing person, they're all going to benefit from this because they're going to be able to put it in their context. That's what this whole thing is about. Is it's not just feeding you with a bunch of prompts or prompt engineering and how to write a better effective prompt. No, it's how do I use this to augment my job in my context so that I can truly become, as Karen said, to be an AI native, where AI is an arrow in my quiver that I'm pulling out every single day, right? I'm pulling it out every day to say, how can I use this? How can I use this? How can I use this?
Yeah. And I always like to put a mix of people in classes. So if you're talking about private, when you say executives, I assume that you're kind of talking about, hey, if my company goes through this, should I put executives in there? I would tell you to kind of sprinkle them throughout a few of the classes, right? And make sure that they're in there with a mix of people. Having a bunch of accountants in one room, I think it would still be powerful, but put other roles together. I always say put other roles together, but put executives in there too, because they are going to learn so much about their company, about their people, and about AI. AI native and what we're doing, it brings out the humanity in a very technological, subject. It's amazing, and I think that that's the difference. I've also taken some of these courses. I've learned a lot from a technical perspective. I learned even more in AI native foundations and change agent from a human perspective. So absolutely, put your executives in there.
All right. Well, let's go rapid fire through a couple of these. I'm going to drag this one up here. Just a minute. Can we do this if we're not using safe already? Absolutely. It says, again, it has nothing to do with safe other than the parent company. And when we're leveraging, I say nothing to do, but we're leveraging a lot of the infrastructure that Safe has. I mean, Safe has been doing training for a long time, so we get to take advantage of all the platforms that they have for training already, right? All the platforms they built that, the Safe Connect, all the different ways that you can do it, all that continuing learning afterwards. They have all those platforms already, right? The, even the testing framework for certification. We can leverage all of that thing, all the things they built from an infrastructure side in terms of credentialing people, the training from the back of the room, how they develop training, taking advantage of all of that. But it's a completely new line of business. You don't have to know anything about Safe whatsoever to take any of this AI terminology. In fact, like I said, it's not even mentioned in it. So, anything you want
But
to
we
add,
don't have
Karen?
to know anything about AI either, I would
Yep.
tell you. But I mean, no matter what, everybody needs to dip their toe into AI. You have to be knowledgeable now moving forward. You don't have to know anything. You may say, gosh, am I qualified enough to go? Absolutely. Just come to the course. You'll walk away very empowered, very knowledgeable in just 2 days with foundations.
AI for course development. Not 100% sure what this means, but if you're talking about AI for developing training courses, there are great things out there. There's Gamma that can help you write presentation materials. There's actually what's the commercial out there now about? There's actually a commercial that airs during NFL games and Major League Baseball games about writing training materials. So if you're talking about course development, um, I don't know if
So this leads me to a question that I had heard before to like, hey, is using AI, is it cheating? So maybe we can kind of take it that way, and I say no. I say it's being very smart. Now, using AI for a finished product and not being involved, absolutely. Right. And so I think that we would all be smart to use AI for course development, for anything that we do. Use it, but don't let it be the end all. And I've never seen a finished product that is all 100% AI generated.
yeah, that true for me too. Like even though I've trained my AI to mimic me in many ways, I'm never going to use what it puts out verbatim, right? I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and say, no, I don't think that's quite right. I'm never going to just use that output. I might use pieces and parts of it, but again, I have the context that it doesn't have, right? I have those relationships. I have that, I'm the one that's going to be in front of those teams and sharing insights with them and sharing, coaching with them and consulting to them. So definitely it is something you can use. When many enterprises are already having many AI courses along with Google, Microsoft, how do we differentiate with this new course? Kind of goes back to the first question of how does this compare with other AI training? Um, a lot it's a lot of those other courses are very technical, right? And they get into some technical inner workings of AWS, OpenAI. I've even been to prompt engineering classes that get like really particular about prompting. This isn't that kind of course, right? This is truly on it's almost a mindset course, right? In many ways is how do I actually embrace AI again as an everyday partner, right? Just like we have kids that are digital native now, they don't know life without a mobile phone, or being cloud native. We don't know solutions now without them being at least partially in the cloud, right? I still work with some on-prem solutions, but the cloud is ubiquitous, right? This is a whole idea of that ubiquitous nature of AI is just, one filter I look through. It's just part of what I do.
Yeah, I would say that the greatest risk, if you're just looking at technical courses that are being offered out there, is that they focus on over automation and under humanization.
Yeah.
And that's what you said. You said, hey, it kind of brings that human side. So when we start to look at speed, and that becomes our metric of being good is the speed, then a lot of times our empathy can disappear. And I really feel like that this course gives us that balance between, right, that so lose like all of our institutional wisdom, our cultural, values and our creative friction, which we need to maintain, right? So how do we keep driving innovation? So I feel like the AI native, I guess the thinking that we talk about, it keeps humanity in the loop by design. And I think that that's the benefit.
Any final thoughts? We're at time, so we got like a minute left. A
Hopefully this
bunch of
was
more
valuable.
questions there. But so I don't know if you have any closing thoughts. Anybody, Beth, Karen, uh, I- again, uh, I love the fact that this is in person. I know that I've seen some things in chat. Look for one in your area. It's not going to be offered remotely anytime soon. It's just not that kind of course, right? We were looking at how would we even model this to be an online course? It's not that kind of course. This is so, it is indescribable. It's so hard to describe, as Karen has said, it's so hard to describe how beneficial it is to be with everyone and the learning that you get from each other and the hands-on and the collaboration that happens. You're not going to get in even a breakout room. It's just not going to happen.
So even if your company is not offering it, look for an individual one. If you don't see one in your location, Beth has, I know she put her email here locally. We kind of need you all to tell us, who's interested and where to come because it is a game changer from a personal perspective and from a professional perspective. So we look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Awesome questions. All right. Thanks for being vulnerable and asking those questions
Great.
and really sharing with us because we want to know what people are really feeling out there. So thanks for the extra minute. And with that, that's a wrap, folks.
Take care.